say, please sit. We've been on the air for almost 23 years, and I've had to do some hard monologues along the way, but this one's the hardest because late last night, early this morning, we lost someone very special who was much too young to go, and I'd like to tell you about him, if you don't mind. In 1977, my family moved to Las Vegas. My parents sold our house in Brooklyn, and we moved 3,000 miles across the country. They bought a house in a subdivision of Las Vegas called Spring Valley. They bought one of these cookie-cutter tract homes in a neighborhood that had just been built. There was not a tree on the block when we moved in. It was stucco and dirt, and that is where I grew up, on Meadowlark Lane. And there was a boy who lived on my block. He lived across the street and 2 houses over, and I'm sorry, he was a little bit older than me. He was a year older than me. His name was Cleto, but we all called him Junior. We called him Junior because his dad was Cleto too, even though he was the third. Cleto, as he would say, Bandleader Escobedo III. And one day, I was on my block, I was riding my bike, I was wearing boxing gloves and my mother's sunglasses and a headband, and Cleto watched me go down the street, and years later he told me the first time he saw me, he thought I was special. And I don't mean special like this fella is special, I mean like Special Olympics type special. And he saw me when a poor, mentally unfortunate kid, and eventually we met, we became friends, and not just regular friends, we became like 24/7, Mom, please let me sleep over, please kind of friends. One summer I slept over at the Escobedo house 33 nights in a row. For real, my mother used to make me get down on my knees and beg to sleep at his house in front of him, and I would gladly do it because we were never bored. We were always up to something. Wiffle ball on the front lawn, Nerf football in the street. We dressed up as cowboys. We set fire to Hot Wheels. Cleto had a warped secondhand pool table in his garage. We'd shoot pool. We would box for hours in his backyard. In his bedroom, we would box. We definitely gave each other many concussions. We would cut off each other's air supply and knock each other out for fun. We would stay up all night ordering pizzas to our neighbors' houses, and we'd make crank calls in the middle. We'd make crank calls, record them with a little microphone attached to a suction cup so we could listen back. We made a rap album like the Beastie Boys, except very bad. We made up mean songs about our neighbors and friends. He'd play piano, I would sing along. His parents had a Betamax and HBO, which we would use to try to see naked people. Cleto was very focused on sex from a young age. He knew everything about sex, and he taught me all of it. Now, half of the everything he taught me was sometimes dangerously wrong, very wrong. Like, he told me it was impossible to get a girl pregnant in a jacuzzi because hot water deactivated the sperm. And that, by the way, is incorrect. Don't try that. But he knew a lot of stuff, and I wanted to hear all of it. Cleto lost his virginity when most kids are still eating pouches of Big League Chew. So he was very cool. He wore his hair like John Travolta. He blow-dried it. He sometimes wore a tie to school just for the hell of it. He'd dress up. There you go. And then so I wore a tie and blow-dried my hair like John Travolta's sister, Ellen Travolta. In Little League, Cleto played catcher, which he felt was the best position, so I played catcher in Little League. We'd go to the gym sometimes. We were both very skinny, and he would read these bodybuilder magazines. He wanted to be muscular, like Frank Zane was his favorite bodybuilder, even though we were both built like Muppets. So he signed up for this crappy gym in Vegas called Camelot, and sometimes I would go with him. He would work out. I'd lay on the massage table with the rollers on it. And sometimes Siegfried from Siegfried and Roy would come into Camelot, which was one of the beautiful little miracles that happen when you grow up in Las Vegas. Siegfried would come in, he'd do 20 sit-ups, and then go sit in the hot tub for an hour. We could never figure out why this millionaire magician, who probably had a hot tub at home, would want to be in a gross locker room in the suburbs of Las Vegas with a bunch of naked guys walking around. And then eventually we figured out why. You know, you can't get pregnant in a hot tub. Cleto taught me all the dirty things. He was so much fun. He was wild. It's funny because as an adult, he was not wild. He was a dad, who, if we did go out, we'd go on a fishing trip. He liked to stay home with his family. He never missed a day of work. But when we were kids, he was stealing fire extinguishers out of motels and shooting kites out of the sky with a shotgun on our block in our neighborhood. He would, every weekend when we were in high school, we'd go out carousing, as we called it, with our friends Jimmy and Tommy. We'd just drive around and do dumb stuff. And inevitably, we'd end up in one of those giant, brightly lit Vegas adult novelty stores. The ones that sold sex toys and refrigerator magnets, that kind of thing. And every time, I still don't know how he did it, every time we'd go to the store, we'd get in the car, and he would pull out of nowhere, he'd pull out the largest rubber penis you've ever seen in your life. Each one bigger than the next. One time, my parents went away for the weekend. We had a party at my house, and Cleto, of course, saw this as an opportunity to implement sex with his girlfriend. So Cleto was very advanced, but also very careful. He wore 2 condoms just in case. He would layer his condoms. Unfortunately, he left a wrapper from one of the 2 condoms next to my parents' bed, and of course, my mother found it within seconds of coming home from vacation, which was big trouble. This was a major thing. But the sad part of the story is my parents came down with this Trojan wrapper. Not for 1 second did they think it might be mine. They knew it was Cleto's, which was insulting. So they brought me in the kitchen. My mother she held it up like the Eucharist. She's like, whose is this? Cleto? And I had to admit, yeah, it was Cleto. They're like, why was he in our bed? Why wouldn't he at least do it in your bed? And I had to explain he refused to do it in my room because I had a trundle bed, which is one of those beds you pull out from under another bed, and he didn't want us to hear it squeak. So Cleto was at work when my parents confronted me about this. So I couldn't call him to give him a heads up. My dad wanted to talk to him about it. And my dad never talked to anyone about anything other than bowling and yard work. So we worked at a clothing store, Miller's Outpost. Cleto was at the register, and I said, what's the worst thing that could have happened? And he said, without a second's hesitation, David Letterman died? And I said, okay, what's the second worst thing that could happen? And he knew. I didn't even have to tell him. He knew he left a condom wrapper next to my parents' bed. And then my dad talked to him, which was funny. My dad knew he couldn't get him to stop having sex, so I think he made him promise to stop littering. We had so many adventures. We would laugh so hard. We had our own language that like almost no one else understood. We didn't have to say anything. We'd sit here at rehearsal every day. We didn't have to look at each other. I knew he was thinking about looking at me, and I was thinking about looking at him. We'd look at each other like this, and that would be it. We loved all the same things: baseball, fishing, boxing, Ali, Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, Woody Allen, Michael McDonald, Huey Lewis, Stevie Wonder, and most of all, we loved David Letterman. We never missed David Letterman. And the first time I was on the Letterman show was in 1999. It was a really big deal for both of us. That afternoon before the show, I was so nervous. I was walking in New York City, just walking fast, trying to burn off the nervous energy. And I called him just so we could be amazed together that this was happening. And it was an amazing thing. Cleto was a phenomenal saxophone player. From a very young age, he was a child prodigy who would get standing ovations in junior high school, if you can imagine that. And his dad was a sax player. His dad was in a band, a very successful band from Texas called Los Blues, but he gave up his career because he didn't want to go on the road and be away from his son. He didn't want to miss raising his son. So he quit being a musician in 1966 when Junior was born. He got a job as a busboy at Caesar's Palace, where Sammy Davis Jr. recognized him. He knew him from the band he was a fan of, and he felt bad seeing him busting tables. So he called the man who ran entertainment at Caesar's Palace and got Cleto Sr. a job as Sammy's personal room service butler, which was a solid consolation for hanging up his horn, which he gladly did to be with his family, not even a hint of regret or resentment. So when Cleto Jr. became a professional musician, Cleto Sr. was thrilled. He got to live vicariously through his son, who started playing in bars and clubs and lounges in Las Vegas. And then eventually, he was spotted by a guy who worked for Paula Abdul. Paula Abdul was a huge star at the time, and she hired Cleto to sing and play sax on her tour.
Oh, Cleto, sing it to me. Girl, you know I love you. Oh.
We never stopped making fun of that hairstyle. And then when the tour was over, Paula Abdul signed him to a record deal. He made an album. We were all so excited about it. You know, we're still kids. And all of a sudden, Cleto has an album. You know, I went to Tower Records and bought it there. But Cleto was never really a pop star. He was more of a serious musician. He was a great saxophone player. He loved jazz and R&B and different kinds of music than what the record company wanted from him. The album didn't sell, so Cleto went back out on the road with big artists, Luis Miguel, Mark Anthony, Philip Bailey. He did a lot of studio work, and for fun, he had a band he would play with here in town at local restaurants and bars. And then one day, in September of 2002, I got a talk show just out of nowhere. I had a meeting with an executive at ABC named Lloyd Braun, and he hired me to host this show. And when you do a show like this, you need a few things. You need a desk, you need an announcer, you need a Guillermo, and you need a band. And of course, I wanted Cleto to lead my band. We grew up watching Dave and Paul, and the idea that anyone other than him would lead the band was terrifying. It had to be him. I was so scared they would say no, and I would have to have another band. I had to work up the nerve to even bring it up because I knew my best friend from growing up plays the saxophone. He could lead the band, wasn't a great pitch. So, but it had to happen. And not only did I want Cleto to lead the band, I wanted his dad to be in the band. So I pitched it to Lloyd. I said, okay, so the guy I have in mind is my best friend from childhood, but he's really good. You have to see him. We set up an audition. Cleto had a regular gig at a restaurant in the Valley called Cafe Cordial. I told him the plan. I said, call your dad, tell him to come out here, tell him to bring his sax, which again, he hadn't played professionally for at that time, like 30 years. I said, don't tell him this is an audition because I know he's gonna get nervous. So his dad came out from Vegas. He brought his sax. He lost the neck of his saxophone minutes before the gig, but he found it and they played and they were great. Cleto put together a great group of musicians. Our band, the original lineup, Jeff Babko, Toshi Yanagi, Jimmy Earl, Jonathan Dressel, Cleto Sr., some of the most talented musicians in the world. And Cleto and his dad did a special song. They played Pick Up the Pieces by the Average White Band, which is 2 saxophones. And Lloyd saw it. He saw the father and son together. He said, I love it. And he just got up and left. And we've been working together every day for almost 23 years now. So when we told Cleto Sr. that he had the job, I said, hey, you got to take a leave of absence from your room service gig at Caesar's Palace in case the show gets canceled and you have to go back. So he went and he took 1 leave of absence, and we were still on the air. He took another one. We were still on the air. He took another one. And finally, they're like, Cleto, you don't work here anymore. You're on TV. And so he quit that job and never went back. And I've often said that the single best thing about doing this show was getting the opportunity to allow Cleto Sr. to pick up where he left off in 1966 and become a musician again with his son. And Cleto Sr. and his wife Sylvia, Cleto's mom, have been my second parents since I was in the 4th grade. I've known them 47 years. These people have never once yelled at me, not one time. They are the best people. Sylvia comes to work here every day, sits in that seat, despite the fact that she does not work here. She does not have a job here. She comes and stays all day to be near her husband and son. She's working those rosary beads in the audience every night. She's probably halfway through a Hail Mary right now. This is a very tight family. This is the kind of family when they aren't together, call each other 15 times a day. It is a small, tight family. And then around 20 years ago, it got bigger. Cleto met a girl. Cleto met a lot of girls, but this girl was the one. She was working as a waitress across the street. Her name is Lori. She's from Minnesota. Cleto and Lori fell in love. They got married. They had 2 beautiful kids, Jesse and Cruz, who Cleto loves so much. And I hope I can remind them as they grow up how much he loves them, because it's a lot. And I mean, everyone loves Cleto. Everyone here at the show, we are devastated by this. It's just not fair. He was the nicest, most humble, kind, and always funny person. And more than anything, Cleto loved to show his ass to others. You turn around, you look back, and there he is. His ass was just out. He loved to moon. He kept that tradition alive. When we were kids, my mother would sometimes drive us to school. We had a big Chevy Impala station wagon. Cleto would quietly slip his pants down and moon people from the back of the car. That's us together. Can you tell which one of us is which? His little brown ass pressed up against the window of my mom's car directly over a bumper sticker that said, "The family that prays together stays together." We had a lot of fun when we were kids. Much of it at my expense, by the way. This is me. He's dumping freezing cold water on me in the shower. Cleto had a bicycle with a sidecar attached to it, welded to the frame. He called it his side hack. And he had me sit in the side hack, and then he would drive me directly into garbage cans and bushes. I'd sleep over his house, and when I wake up, he'd almost always be on the phone with a girlfriend. One morning, we're in bed, we're both in our underwear. Cleto's on the phone. He says, "Jim, will you go grab my glasses? I left them in the living room." I was like, "Is anyone home?" Because I was in my underwear. I didn't want anyone to see me. He said, "No, nobody's home." So I run in the living room, and I get in, and there are his grandparents sitting on the couch. And I went back in, and he's dying laughing in the room. Cleto was the leader growing up. I was the sidekick. He was the star. Cleto played saxophone, I played clarinet. That's kind of all you need to know about us. When I was a local DJ at a junky little radio station in Palm Springs, Cleto was on stage playing to 20,000 people. And then a few years went by, and our roles reversed. It was my show. My name was on everything. I was all of a sudden the star. And a lot of people who have a huge amount of talent would have a problem with that. Cleto never did. Not a twinge of jealousy, envy, passive aggressiveness, none of that, ever. The opposite. He was proud of me. He loved me. He loved seeing all of this happen. He loved being a part of it. He never took it for granted. He would call me, he'd send me notes all the time, big stuff, little stuff, whatever, tell me, "Oh, this was so funny, I love this, I'm so proud of you, I'm so happy that we get to be together all the time." He would tell me how lucky he was. He was just a great older brother, no baggage, all love. There's no one in my life I felt more comfortable with. He was the godfather to my son, Kevin. We were best men at each other's weddings. He threw me like the worst bachelor party ever at his Uncle David's apartment. Uncle David didn't even have furniture. We sat on the floor with a 12-pack of beer and watched The Honeymooners. We watched the same 3 movies over and over and over again. It never was enough. It's so strange. There were thousands of houses for sale in Vegas. My parents happened to buy one that was right across the street from this kid that I would just fit together with so perfectly. And maybe the most important thing Cleto ever taught me was that my relatives were funny. Like, when I was a kid, my Aunt Chippy and Uncle Frank were always yelling at each other. Mostly she was yelling at him, and I didn't like it. And one day he called me, he said, "Come over." I said, "I can't, my Aunt Chippy and Uncle Frank are coming for dinner." And he said, "Oh, can I come?" Which was weird because we always slept over at his house. I said, "Well, why do you want to come?" He said, "Oh, those two are hilarious." And that night, I watched him watching them, and I thought, oh, yeah, they are hilarious. And years later, they became a big part of this show, largely because of that. You know, when my Uncle Frank was sick, my Uncle Frank passed away. Cleto visited him in the hospital every day on his way home from work, every day. And by the way, it wasn't even on his way home from work. It was out of the way home. But he loved Uncle Frank, and Uncle Frank loved him. He used to say, "Junior, when you're on stage, you sparkle. You sparkle." Uncle Frank passed away in 2011 on August 23rd, which was Cleto's birthday. And early this morning, not long after midnight, Cleto passed away on what was Uncle Frank's birthday, 11/11, Veterans Day. And even though I'm heartbroken to lose him, I'm going to take yet another lesson from him and acknowledge how lucky I was to have him literally at my side for so many years. And I want to thank the doctors and nurses at UCLA Medical Center for taking incredibly good care of him, particularly Dr. Fatty Caldas, Dr. Catherine Donat, Dr. Emily Schwitzer, Dr. Manuel Blanco, our good friend Dr. Jake Lentz, so many strong and caring nurses and technicians. including Remy, Becca, Tess, Gigi, Brian, Michelle, Andrew Baird, who works at UCLA. I'm sorry if I missed anybody. I want to also thank the team at Sherman Oaks Hospital that initially took him in. I'm grateful for my friends, Cleto's friends, Jimmy, Jeff, Fred, Toshi, Jonathan, Damon, Jenny, Jane, Guillermo, Mickey, Rick, Debbie, Eric, everyone who checked in on him, everyone who called and visited him, his great neighbors who've been helping his family, everyone here at our show have been so supportive. My family, my wife, Molly, Cleto's wife, Lori, Cleto's kids, Lori's family, who all did their best to be strong during these awful few months. And mostly, I want to thank Cleto's parents, Cleto and Sylvia, for making him and for sharing him with me and with all of us, and for treating me like their own son always. Cherish your friends. We're not here forever. Thank you for indulging me. We're gonna take the next couple of nights off, but I wanted to be here tonight to tell you about my friend, and also Cleto loved Eddie Murphy a lot, and I don't think he would have wanted us to miss this. So we will be right back with Eddie Murphy.